Hello. Today we're looking at the skyscraper and the park. We're focusing on air, height, urban development, and a few other things that you'll see in the class objectives in the next slide. Our class objectives today are to examine the historic foundations of the so-called clean slate of modernism. We'll look at race and Art Deco. Specifically, we'll look at cultural appropriation and Art Deco. Our material studies are air and height. We're going to look at the ziggurat, the skyscraper, and we'll take a moment with the park. Let's start close to home. Many of you by now are very familiar with this skyscraper that we see on the right. It is the corporate home for the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, or at least it was. It has now got a neighbor, a more 1960s corporate form of architecture, but this early site that we see here in this postcard really became the signpost for the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company itself. Any memos the company put out had the image of this building on it. It was to be the icon, the symbol of what the corporation stood for. What we see on the left is a tobacco field near Durham. Take a minute with the image. We can see in the foreground these lush, ripe tobacco plants. Their leaves overwhelm the scale of the humans who are there as part of the cultivation process. It's the tobacco that was first and foremost in the minds of the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company's stakeholders. And the outpouring, the implications of this for Winston-Salem have dramatic effects. On the one hand, R.J. Reynolds and his wife Catherine Reynolds chose to keep all of their corporate infrastructure, all of the top officials in their corporate structure in Winston-Salem. Unlike other companies, unlike other tobacco companies in North Carolina, in fact, who set up their corporate headquarters in New York. Reynolds chose to keep everything here at home in order for the money, the wealth to flow back into the city, or at least into a particular part of the city. If you look at a city map of Winston-Salem, if you drive from the west part of Winston-Salem to the east or the east to the west, you'll see there's a stark divide. And this divide is embedded in the corporate structure of the Reynolds Corporation that really has made Winston-Salem everything that it is today. From city planning, the street maps. Wake Forest itself is on land formerly owned by the R.J. Reynolds Corporation. Winston-Salem is a fascinating case study in itself of the influence of one corporation in the design of the city. And that means the racialized implications of the design of the city. There's a stark racial divide between West Winston-Salem and East Winston-Salem. Much of East Winston-Salem was home to the factory workers who worked the plants that are now Wake downtown. All of those processing buildings were part of the original R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, as well as the Haynes, exactly what you think about it, Haynes Cotton Empire. In another class, we dive into this in more detail. But here, we'll stick to the fascinating history of this building, of skyscrapers themselves. The R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Corporation building was designed by the world-famous New York architectural firm of Shreve and Lamb. Later, they became Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon. It was designed and built between 1928 and 1929. And at that time, the Reynolds building's height made it the tallest building in North Carolina. And more importantly to our theme today, its so-called, quote, exotically modern Art Deco style made it a Winston-Salem landmark upon completion. Do you recognize the building here? The Reynolds Building was designed by the same architectural firm that designed the Empire States Building, which was completed 3 years after the Reynolds Building in 1931. The Empire States Building has a roof height of 1,250 feet and stands a total of 1,454 feet tall, including its antenna. When it was built, the Empire States Building stood as the world's tallest building until the construction of the World Trade Center in 1970, 39 years later. Following the collapse of the World Trade Center in September 11th of 2001, the Empire State Building was again the city's tallest until 2012. I've got a fascinating video for you to see on the Empire State Building. Details I had no idea about until I decided to take a closer look at really what's called the grandfather of the Empire State Building, our Reynolds Building in downtown Winston-Salem. So be sure to watch this video.